Hello everyone, again we are here. We are here on Indigenous Hands, the Indigenous Voices, that is brought to you by Save the Deaf and Endangered Languages Initiative. This is the only place we discuss Indigenous sign languages, especially Indigenous sign languages of African deaf communities and beyond, okay? All right, for the past 3 weeks, we have been talking about our language consultant, one of our deaf signers, Aisha, and we've been dealing with the topic, learn from your Indigenous deaf signers. I hope you have been learning from Aisha and Aisha's story. I hope I have been doing my best in bringing out some of the major issues or some of the interesting aspects of her story and the way she presented her story. Remember, the reason we are doing this study and especially this series is because we want to show how an Indigenous sign language can undertake linguistic analysis. It's just a simple thing, okay? We are not at least trying to bring linguistic terminology to confuse anyone. We are trying to ensure that those terminologies that should have been kept for linguists, we break them down. I hope I'm doing that to the best of my ability. If I am not doing it right, please, I will ask you to send me a comment. You can comment on the video on YouTube, or you send us an email on info@sdeli.org. We will be very glad. Okay, so in today's series, I would like to conclude on Aisha's narrative. I would like to conclude by looking at 2 other parameters that can be elicited in her story, and they are location and iconicity. I know when I was dealing with the hand shapes, I touched a little bit of palm orientation, a little bit of non-manual signs, and also a little bit of the movements. I might be bringing some of these also in today's discussion, but I am only concerned more today on location and iconicity. Before I go on, I would like to discuss what iconicity means, or at least explain it a little bit further. My colleague, Dr. Mary Edward, is one of the experts that study iconicity in sign language. I am not one of those, okay? So, maybe one of these days, Dr. Edward will also come to discuss iconicity with us here. She has discussed Adamorobe Sign Language with us, and on this topic, she might want to give us additional knowledge about her area of expertise. Okay, but in my little knowledge of linguistic analysis and sign language, I am going to try to break it down what iconicity means. Whenever you hear linguists say iconicity, do not be afraid, okay? What are they saying? They are just saying that some signs are iconic, which is what I'm now confusing you the more. All right, when they say that some signs are iconic, it means that some signs resemble what they refer to. Some signs, of course, can be picked upon by the way they are signed and relate them to what they are talking about, what they refer to, which linguists call the reference. And this is not only about signs or sign language. 2 great properties of language, spoken and signed, or iconicity and arbitrariness. And in measurement, studies have it that sign languages are more iconic than arbitrary, while spoken languages are more arbitrary than iconic. Not as if that these two properties are not found in both languages or both modalities, both spoken and signed. If you look at Aisha's story, you can pick some things and understand what she signed, even if you do not know the sign language. Even if you are not studying the sign language like I've been doing, you can pick a few things and say, it seems that this sign is this. So when you are able to make that observation, you are dealing with the property of sign language called iconicity. Does this that is signed mean this? Yes. Why? Because that's how it looks. In spoken language, I remember when we were learning iconicity and reference, you bring some philosophy and logic into it. When you hear they say, does a knife cut objects because it is called knife? Or is it called knife because it cuts objects, because we use it to cut something? Whichever way that your answer comes from, well, maybe you are right, maybe you are not. But the question of whether knife is called knife in English because it cuts something, or whether we use it to cut because it's called knife, is a question that is open-ended or has an open-ended response. And remember, the word knife is knife only in English. It is not knife in my language, Igbo. It is mma. It is another thing in another language. Is another thing in another language. Now put it in your own language and ask yourself, do you call it mma in Igbo because it cuts something? Or does it do that thing because it is called mma? If you look at it all around, for this example that I gave, you might arrive at the answer that the name given to this object and what it does do not relate. And if you arrived at that answer, that means you are dealing with the arbitrariness of language. But if in the abstract form, in the imaginative form, we are able to link mma to cutting, we are dealing with iconicity. If we can think of cutting of something just by mentioning of mma or knife, it means they are related, and that word is iconic. So this is found very much more in sign languages, and I am more interested in gesture than I am in iconicity or iconic signs. So because there's a lot of gestures, or there are many signs that are developed from gestures, this makes it, I think, easy for you to find more iconic signs than you might find in spoken languages, and also in indigenous sign languages that we are looking at. You remember, these are languages that are at the form where we can describe them as underdeveloped. That means they are still developing. And because they are still developing, they are still forming. The base is formed, but the vocabulary has to be built. And you know that we build vocabularies by the amount of usage of that language. And when we continue to study that language, the language begins to metamorphose. The language begins to emerge. The language begins to advance. It is as simple as that. That is why we are studying Aisha, how she narrated her story in her own language. So let us look at Aisha again today for the last time in this segment and see how she crafted this singular story of how she fell. Right. From today's Aisha's story, I'm going to be looking at iconicity and location. And I have explained iconicity. I didn't bother to use my muscle and energy to explain a location because I believe that if you know English the extent I do know, even though you know better than me or lesser than I do, at least you know what a location means. A position, a particular point. It could be for sign language, it is that point, it is that space that we can feel, that we can touch, that is either here with us or in the distance. We can derive our location here or there. And we can derive our location on the body, on the parts of the body, or what we call the neutral space. The neutral space can be part of the signing space, or it can extend depending on what a signer is signing. So for Aisha's story, I am able to isolate some major signs that I think are iconic. Number one is time, the sign for time. She signed here. And this sign for time, I said in second to the last video that the sign for time is often conventional and found across several sign languages. And this is suggested to have been because of ordinarily, even a non-signer who possibly wears a wristwatch often is subconsciously ready to look at time here, like this. If you are a watch wearer, a regular watch wearer, if you want to look at time, even when you are not wearing a wristwatch, you find out that you can subconsciously do it by looking at your wrist. And so relate that to signing and what Aisha did. So time is often signed here, either here or even here. So between the wrist and the back of the palm, this space is often used for time. And many people can recognize this sign in a narrative such as Aisha's own. Except that now this sign can mean time as in time, can mean time as in setting, can mean time as in period, can mean time as in duration. So it depends on the context now, but if we look at what Aisha said, the time I was, or you can interpret it as when I was. But let's go with the time I was. And that's what she signed. The next sign that I think is iconic is the sign for plane. Aisha located plane in the neutral space and used her hands to give us the magnitude or size of the thing we are not seeing that she is representing in her story, bringing in our face to understand. She uses her hand, her finger, to give us the size of it, by which she did an iconic sign by signing plane. Another sign that I found is a sign for climb. Aisha uses her palms to show a progressive movement from down ascending to show climbing, and this is a classifier in core linguistic analysis of sign language to show a movement, hand shape plus movement and palm orientation going together in a sign that is verb. So she indicated climbing with this sign, and I feel it is iconic. And also not because I feel so, because of the culture where this sign language exists, that is also used. Another sign is fall. We see her, she was able to raise her hand, I would say above the signing space, above her head, and releases the hand with a force to show that there is a pull of gravitation that pulls on objects to land on the ground. And the movement and the speed of the downward movement makes us, or makes an average person, to understand that there is a fall. Another sign is carry, which I explained in the last video. Carry. Another sign she signed or she used that I feel is iconic is a sign for dripping. Dripping, which when she was saying water dripping from her ears, dripping down, and her fingers show us that there was a downfall of possibly a liquid. Also, we found the sign for walking. The sign for walking, which she uses her two index fingers with a classifier movement to show us that this is what she could not do. Walking, no. But what could she do? Touching her knees, crawling, yes, that's what she could do. So she brings this sign again for climbing, at this time not moving up but plane. So touching her knees and going with the palms facing down, making a movement, is an indication of crawling as opposed to walking or running, which she could not do at this time because she wasn't well. And the last sign I isolated is a sign for nothing, and I said this is a gestural sign because it is generally used like a hand sign to say nothing, to say well, it doesn't concern me, or to say I don't know, or to say anything in the negation. That's this sign. Emptiness. I couldn't. Nothing. They did all they could, but nothing. They did not succeed. This sign is iconic, in my opinion, in this narrative. All right, I will go over to location. On location, Aisha signed the back palm or the wrist, which is the same sign for time. She located time here. And for plane, she located plane in the neutral space. She knows how to locate plane in the neutral space because that's where it belongs, that's where it is. She also located pain and ache on the chest and on the head to indicate that she was still having pain or ache, or she was still not well. Pain and ache. She used ear and ear to indicate ear or hearing, so she had to touch the ear or the ear this way. So she had to touch her ear to show us that either hearing was or was not happening. For counting, Aisha used her fingers. Traditionally, counting happens with the fingers and the toes in many of our indigenous cultures. So it is also a kind of generally accepted sign. For hospital, where she signed on the arm here, there is an indication that in the hospital you get shot, and one of the places you get shot is on the arm, and so this is also an indigenous gesture. Even though she kind of seemed to sign with some hand shape and with the movement that goes this way, the location for hospital is on the arm, and this is iconic also because of, you get shot here, even though there are other parts of the body where you can get shot. Again, she located the herbs in the neutral space. That is because so many herbs are plants that grow in the bush. Some you can get by bending down to pick them, or climbing some trees, or standing and getting them on the trees. She located crawling on her knees by touching the knees, because when you cannot walk, you crawl if you can crawl. So, and you find out that the knees do this function a lot. When someone cannot walk but can crawl, they use their knees. So Aisha located crawling on the knees, and she located walking on the neutral space. Like I said, you can locate walking here by providing the plane for where on top where walking takes place, and then by making the move, the two-legged walking, or maybe the four-legged walking or something. But she located walking more traditionally or more gestural by this and in the neutral space. So these are the major signs that indicate the location that Aisha implied in her story, and the iconic movements that she made, or iconic signs that she implied. So today we end Aisha's story, the part one of this, by looking at these elements. I don't know what you may have learned, but I feel that I have been able to do justice to Aisha's story to the best of my knowledge. And I ask you, please drop a comment for us on this video if you learned something. Maybe any of the parameters that I discussed, anyone that you know more than I do, please just, give us an opinion, okay? We are studying an understudied indigenous sign language, and it is, awesome that we get your opinion. I am so happy that you have been following this program, especially this episode up to today. And I'm glad that we have learned a lot from Aisha's narrative. By next week, I'm going to introduce another deaf signer, and I bet you are going to learn more. So this is the indigenous hands, the indigenous voices. And here, and only here, we talk indigenous sign languages. We discuss indigenous sign languages. I'll be glad to see you around again by next week. Until then, have a wonderful day. Bye.